Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co-host, Jocelyn Turner. So wonderful to be here tonight, even though I was joking with Dr. Kane. I said, oh, Dr. Kane, this is a morbid topic. I know Mr. Brown probably doesn't feel that way, but sorry, Mr. Brown, I actually thought about that. Tonight, we're going to be talking about why the benefits of pre-planning for your funeral. It's a topic that many of us don't like to have, but a very important topic nonetheless. Of course, as always, joining me is co-host Dr. Rogers Kane. Dr. Kane, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, Miss Turner. As you know, I kept pushing this topic because one of the things that you know, being in medicine, I do witness a lot of death, not necessarily live and in color, but still, I see the aftermath of people dying, and I've even had people die in front of me. One of the things that a lot of families run into is the planning of the funeral in an urgent, in a sense of urgency, and it takes away from, it stresses them out, one thing, but it also takes away from making sure that you do the proper thing as it relates to not just the burial of that person, but the benefit of the family and, post, um, if it's Roger Kane, post Roger Kane's death, and what the family needs to do as it relates to making sure that they protect, uh, my estate for themselves, yada yada yada. So we're going to get into it quite a bit. Our guest is going to that I heard that he's a very smart guy, and that he can tell you himself how long he's been a funeral director, but that he is very dedicated to what he does.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. And again, I keep saying this every week. Every time this guy shows up, I said, and the behind the scenes guy, Dr. Kane, you notice that he doesn't have the behind the scenes guy. He's just called Tyrone now.
But
Tyrone
wait a
Jackson,
minute,
our technology guy.
I don't know if you talked to him earlier to find out his before he got to be the technology guy, what his job was, what his job was as it relates to our topic tonight. I don't
Well,
think you know
I'll
yet.
be happy to hear about that. How you doing this evening, Tyrone?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Jocelyn. And I was telling Dr. Kane earlier that one of my first jobs out of college was selling free meat insurance in Western Kansas and Missouri. So it was quite serendipitous that this topic came up.
Wow.
Go
You never
figure.
know. You never know folks' hidden talents, right?
Exactly.
So joining us tonight, as Dr. Kane has already said, is Mr. Harry Brown. Mr. Brown is a licensed funeral director here in Northeast Florida, and years of experience. He was sharing that he has a business with his wife. So we always love it when families keep it in the business. No pun intended. But how you doing this evening, Mr. Brown?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Wonderful. You know, Mr. Brown, I was reading an article and it talked about the fact that planning ahead provides peace of mind. I mean, I understand what that means, Mr. Brown. However, sometimes it seems that people don't want to talk about it because it creates some level of anxiety for them to talk about death and dying. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you 100%. Whenever the subject of death and dying coming up, I don't know if that's applicable to just black people, but mostly with us, we just don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about dying. We know we can't live forever.
Hmm.
And then most of us just get caught off guard. Even when we expect someone to die, when that time comes, it happens, and people don't have the funds to pay for a funeral.
Yeah, nowadays, Mr. Brown, people are looking towards social media and doing those GoFundMe accounts,
Yeah,
right? But,
right.
it's bigger than that because it also allows the deceased the opportunity to talk about when my dad was dying, he was given a year.
Mhm.
So I started having the conversation with him. And I prefaced it by saying, Dad, I know this is not a pleasant topic to talk about, but I would like to. The first thing I did is he talked about wanting to be buried at the National Cemetery. So I took him there, and my dad was a jokester, right? And he said, we joked about it that, although this is a nice, he said, oh, this will be a nice resting place. I said, all right, Dad, I'm not bringing you back here anytime soon, right?
Right.
This is just a place. And he said, and I don't want to come back here anytime soon. So we kind of joked about that. But we had the serious conversation of, Dad, what's your favorite song? Like, what would you like someone to sing at your service? What's your insurance policy look like? Dr. Kane, why do you think people don't like having that conversation until it seems that their loved one is sick or dying?
One of the things that I've experienced in taking care of older folks, they are, believe it or not, that mother that's 80, that's 85, in her 80s, that the matriarch of the family, more or less, sometimes they don't have a problem with that conversation. The children don't want to hear that conversation. And of course, they're the ones that are actually going to be the ones who bury them. Okay. And so they don't want to hear it from mom. Oh, mom, and they're in denial because obviously when people are crying, really upset about the death of someone, it's not most of the time. Well, at least this is my thoughts. It's not because what they. It's not because of that individual that died. It's because of that individual that died is no longer in my life, and so I'm the guy that's hurting. They're not hurting anymore, and so you don't want to feel that pain prematurely. So you get somewhat in denial, and as if that person will never die. And so when we're doing all that crying and being upset about everything, it's because of you no longer have the benefit of that person in your life, and so they're in denial of that. They don't want to hear about that person no longer being in their life.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. And Tyrone, you talked about you sold pre-need policies.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest pushback that you heard from people when you were discussing pre-need and pre-planning?
Well, I want to kind of chime in first of all on that first question, because in the training for selling, we look at things from an analytical standpoint. And one of the things that they talked about was that folks don't want to talk about dying and death. And Dr. Kane hit the nail on the head. It's not oftentimes it's the person of age, but it's the younger ones. It's because of regret for how they live with their with the person today.
Mm.
So if you're not in good terms with your mother or your father, the conversation of death is harder. If you have regrets and things of that nature for the relationship, the conversation is harder. So one of the things that they taught us to do was to help the person get to a point to live life with the person while they're here to the fullest, understanding that death is a part of life.
Yeah, I tell them quickly, don't bring me. I don't all those flowers and gifts that you can bring to my casket. I'm not gonna see it. Give it to me before I get there. Give it to me while I'm still alive. If you really, when you care about me, show me while I'm here. don't let some celestial statement that you're making upon my death be something that shows your love for me. Show your love for me while I'm still here.
Absolutely. Mr. Brown, let me ask you a question. In
Mhm.
terms of pre-planning, and just think about most recently last week or even last month, of the did you have anybody that came into your business and said, I want to go ahead and pay for my funeral and or my loved ones' funerals now, start paying on it now before they need it? Do you ever have people walking in having that conversation with you?
Yes, ma'am. They're always the older people, not the young people.
Oh,
If you under 60, you don't want to hear anything about somebody dying. And then uh, when you bring up the subject of planning the funeral for people, you may get you may be insulted because people don't want to hear that. You
mm,
talking about what? Now what? Man, you better get away from him with that. You know, I think we're living at a time now when people are more open to it, but you have less people walking in the door talking about, I want to plan my own funeral. And when you do have people walking in the door saying they want to plan their own funeral, they more or less want to talk about it. They want to get an idea of what it's going to cost. They want to make sure they have enough funds or enough insurance to cover it, as opposed to really putting the requests in writing to have it actually done. There's some cons and there's some pros to pre-planning, you know. So some of the things you can't put into a pre-planning service, you know. Some things that you just can't cap the cost on. But most of the things that cost the most, the professional services, the embalming. Uh, am I getting feedback? Is that me?
Yeah, go ahead. We got
Yeah. Okay. Some things, the more costly things you can pre-need, but some of the smaller things that you have no idea what they're going to be like over time, uh, you can't do that as much. But the biggest items you can cover.
like the
And
casket. You can
yeah,
do the casket.
yeah, man, the casket.
Now tell me the difference. I remember when my dad passed, because he was buried at the National Cemetery, they told me that what I had to pay for with the funeral home versus if once he got to the cemetery, then that's when the government took over, right? But the preparation of the body and the drive, if you will, to the funeral, to the cemetery, and even if it's not the national cemetery, wherever your loved one goes, whatever cemetery you use, that's separate from your fees, right?
Right, absolutely. The funeral home has its fees, and the cemetery has its fees. And specifically, the national cemetery, the things the government pays for, is a grave space, the opening and closing of a grave space, a headstone, and a grave liner. And people don't understand the difference between a grave liner and a vault. And all the crypts that the federal government provide for veterans and their dependents as a crypt is 2 depths deep. Whoever dies first go in the bottom, and whoever dies next go in the top. And so that's how our national cemetery in Jacksonville is. And I think national cemeteries all around the country is made up like that. Now, if you're a really fancy person, by fancy, I mean you like to spend a lot of money on funerals, you don't want to go in the government issue liner, you can buy your own private vault. The government will not pay for your own private vault. You have to pay for that. They won't pay for it and have they won't pay to have it delivered to the cemetery. You have to do that. What they give you is free. If you want anything above and beyond that, you have to pay for it at your expense. A lot of people don't get it. A lot of people, and here's some things funeral directors don't tell families about government issue grave liners. You know, people put thousands of dollars in a casket that's supposed to keep mama for a longer time, keep daddy for a longer time, and they go on a government issue liner. The government issue liner don't seal. It It's a concrete contained in the earth. They open it up and put you in it. They cover it back up. And you know, we're in Florida. We below sea level.
Well, let me ask you this. So, given that, uh, uh, talking about morbid, I know how I can be.
Yeah, I couldn't even say anything after that, Dr. Kane. I'm just like, wow.
Talking about morbid, let me just say this. You know, when it comes down, when they put me in and whether it's lined, unlined,
Yeah.
who's going to go in there and look at it to see what preservation is
Right.
there? Okay. I mean, when you're looking at cost, I mean, I'm not going to go in after I put my family member in the ground
Right.
and go to check and see. Let me see how good the body look right now. You know, 10 years from now, do I really care? I'm not going to do it 3 days from now, no less. You know, no less. I mean, and it's a lot more monies. And you can tell us about the cost.
Right.
It's a lot more money when you start adding those costs. But is that truly a necessity? And is that one of the reasons that a person should be planning for funeral? Because if they plan for it, you take a lot of the emotions out. And in terms of spending monies that really just gonna get buried into the ground with you.
Now, before you answer that, let me tell you one of the things that I remember that we used to talk about all the time, and I think what Mr. Harry Brown is saying it is specific to your question, Doctor. This is the very reason why pre-planning is important, because when a person thinks about the passing of a loved one, all the details that have to be decided are not in their mind. All right. So had the person not seen this show and went in to talk to them, this information, they would not have even known that information. You were saying, Dr. King, that, hey, who's going to know? Well, the truth is, no one may never know, but the decision still has to be made. That's the part that's left for the loved ones. Again, bringing it back to the subject title here, and that's the reason why pre-planning is important. It does, as I remember, and Mr. Brown, please correct me if I'm wrong, it does two really important things. One, it makes sure that all the finite detail decisions are decided at a time and a pace that is comfortable for the buyer, and it makes sure that the loved one gets what they want and not what others say they want.
Right. That's a good point to make. And I think a lot depends on the film professional you're dealing with. Most of us, we just want to sell a service and we want to get paid for the service we sell to you. All the details and the particulars about it may not necessarily come out. You know, for instance, Miss Turner talked about her father taking a trip to the National Cemetery. See how nice and serene the National Cemetery look. And those cemeteries are kept up in perpetuity. Then you go to a local cemetery like what we have here in Jacksonville, and you find out when the people who own the cemetery, when they die, nobody is there to keep the cemetery up, and all the black cemeteries in Duval County is condemned. We don't have any. We have to go to other people's cemeteries to bury our people. Yeah, see, so I don't know why when black people who own cemeteries die, they don't have a succession plan to pass the cemetery on to another family member to keep it up. The state of Florida does require a perpetual care fund be set up for all cemeteries in the state of Florida. So when the owner dies, the money in the perpetual care fund continues to keep the cemetery up indefinitely. But we see a lot of that. Now, let me get back to Mr. Tyrone's question. It is important that you understand what you're getting into. And if you plan your service ahead of time, you call the shots on what you want, how you want it, how much you want to spend on it. See, I've had people to come in my office very recently. This man, he just wanted to be buried. No viewing, no funeral. You know, we can do that pretty inexpensively. You know, just put you in a container, take you out to the cemetery, and bury you. But sometimes the survivors can't deal with what you want. And then after you come to the funeral home and you put your $5,000 prepaid funeral together, your children and your grandchildren and whoever else is your survivors, they don't want to live with that. They want to celebrate you. And now they want to spend money that you don't want them to spend, and money that you told them don't spend on me when I die. Take this money and buy a new car, go on a vacation, or pay some bills, or do some of that kind of stuff with the money. But some people just can't go by what you want. But if you can get to a place in your mind and in your heart where you want a very simple service, you don't want to spend more than $3,000 on it, people should follow that plan if a funeral home can give you that type of service, if that's what you truly want. We have people come into my office so they don't have money, they don't have insurance, they don't have no pre-plan, they don't have no post-plan, they don't have no in-between plan. They just come in and they want a lot and they want you to pay for it and give a payment plan. Payment plans are not pre-planned. No, when you die, you have to be disposed of, and you have to figure out how you're going to do that. Are you going to be cremated? Are you going to be buried? Are you going to be directly cremated? Are you going to have some form of ceremony and then be cremated? Or are you just going to be embalmed or not embalmed? The Jews and the Muslims, they be buried in a 24-hour period of death. Some of them can have some of the most cost-effective funerals. I find a lot of Jews and Muslims, when they bury within that 24-hour period of time, they spend a lot of money on funerals.
So I don't understand that. And I apologize, Mr. Brown, that I don't really have an intelligent response to it other than, wow, right? But here's what I'm thinking, though.
Mm-hmm.
If a person does not have insurance,
Yeah.
and they walk into your office and they say, my loved one is dying,
Yeah.
I know it's going to cost to bury them.
Right.
Can they walk in, and to my knowledge, they don't have insurance, right?
Right.
So can they walk into your business and you say, well, here's the basic cost, and they can set up a plan with you to start paying on it prior to their loved one's demise?
Well, that wouldn't be legal. That particular question wouldn't be legal. You can't walk into a funeral home and get what used to be. And years gone by, you used to do that. They call them house accounts. House accounts are illegal now. You can't come in and just do that. You have to go to a funeral home that's set up the way the state says set it up, and then pay into it the way the state requires you to pay into it, so that if you die or you go off the scene, your funds are protected. But these house accounts now, back in the day, they had these things called bury your leave funds. This was early 1900s. You would go to a funeral home and you would start paying on your funeral every time. And when you die, your funeral would either be paid for, or when you die, you will pay the rest of it off. Today, you don't know who to trust. So the state makes sure your funds are protected, just in case you file bankruptcy and shut down. You do the wrong thing and the state shuts you down. Your money don't get lost in the shuffle.
So what I'm hearing, and just trying to make sure I understand, what I'm hearing is that, and I know this again going back to morbid. If you got your layaway plan for your funeral,
Yeah.
they no longer state no longer allows that because the monies that you put into play to pay for your funeral, that person may take that money and not really hold if something happens to them unintentionally or intentionally, they decide not to allow that money to be used towards your funeral. The state is trying to protect those funds that you put into that funeral home, for that whomever the individual burial plan is, right? So that person can know, so that the funeral home director cannot come back and say, well, you owe me $10,000 when that person actually just scheduled a $2,000 funeral, or they like you say, they go bankrupt, and then you have nobody to bury mom, dad, whomever kind of was sort of prepaying the funeral.
Well, see, years ago now, Doc, think about this. People didn't even have insurance, so they came up with this idea about the burial leaves. So people paid into something on their burial before they died. Well, you can't have these house accounts. You understand what I'm saying about a house account?
Is that like going and put a layaway plan over at Kmart or something?
Yeah, you can't have that. That's not illegal. You can get a legal pre-need because your money is going in a trust fund or some kind of insurance funded pre-need program that's going to protect your interest. Because I was told that no insurance company has failed in the last 100 century. In the last century, in America, because what happened, the insurance commissioners, they monitor the insurance companies and they make sure they have enough assets to perform the service futurely. You got me? So when you get in a program that's protected that way, you don't lose, because if Harry Brown die, Harry Brown bottoms up, Harry Brown decide to do what he was going to do, your money will be either with an insurance program or it'll be with a trust program. And so you just notify the insurance company or the trust fund and they pay the funeral home what's coming to you out of that plan you put together.
Now, how do I ensure when there's a contract that Harry Brown put together? So if I'm walking in right now, I want to prepay my funeral, right? And I start making a down payment or just pay you up front $2,000. I'm just throwing a number out. $2,000 for my funeral services that you and I agreed upon. How do I know that I am contracting with someone whom the state has approved to be able to do that type of contract?
Well, funeral homes these days now have to have a thing called a certificate of authority. That's an issue. That's a document issued by the state to give you the authority to do pre-need funerals. And your money is either going in an insurance funded program or a trust funded program. And when they write that up, that stuff goes to Tallahassee, so it's on record.
So I got to make sure you have a certificate of authority.
Right.
You going to show that to me as a hanging on the wall or what?
That's a license, just like my embalmer's license, my funeral director's license. It's got to be publicly displayed and you can see it. So you're not getting, for lack of a better term, screwed over, when you put your money out there and wonder what happened to your money, because it's going either in a insurance funded program or it's going in a trust funded program, and your money is protected that way. So if Harry Brown jump off the bridge and commit suicide and his wife got to shut the funeral home down, your money is safe.
So now, is it still a situation where the person who does this, say Dr. Kane does it, he's presented with the documentation to the proof that his money is either funded via a trust, or if it's funded via a insurance vehicle, or is that not required? Because I know when we were doing it,
Tyrone.
okay.
Let me answer that. I just want to. So when I come in and make that contract with you in terms of prepaying my funeral, and I want to go off and give it to the spouse, what am I presented with to give to the spouse so that they can go back and have a certificate or some proof
I
that
lost,
we
I
did
lost,
what we supposed to do.
I lost connection with y'all there for about a minute or so. So I don't
Oh,
know. Did you go out?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, I was saying if I came into Harry Brown's funeral home
Right,
and I decided that I want to prepay for my funeral,
right.
what should I look for from you as a business owner
You
to,
look.
to be able to present to my family to say, here, if something
Well,
happens to me, should I die, here I got the prepaid funeral and yada, yada, yada. What should I look for?
well, first of all, you want to look for my certificate of authority. It's a license to do the business in the state. The next thing you want to do when you sign the contract, you have a copy of it. And a copy of it either goes to the insurance company or it goes to the trust fund. So when you die, whether I'm in the picture or not, you don't lose. You just submit your documents to the funding company. To the trust company or to the insurance company. Now, most of the plans in this area are backed by insurance companies, and it works the same way a regular insurance company would work, except it's just insurance funded.
So I just need to
So
make sure
today,
I got in my hand something
right.
Oh yeah,
that
Yeah.
validates.
you're gonna have a contract. This if you if you came into my place and paid for a funeral, you're gonna have a contract for that funeral. And if you if you contract with me for a $3,000 funeral, a $5,000 funeral, a $10,000 funeral, you want to have the numbers in writing right before you. So the same thing, it works pretty much the same way. It's just handled different. You're not dead yet. So now your money is going to a trust plan or it's going to an insurance company. And they're gonna have your money, they're gonna take your money and do what they want to do with it. They're gonna invest your money. And when you pass away, your money coming back to your beneficiary to do your bidding in that contract.
So if you're just joining us, we're talking about
So not
the benefits. Just a second, Mr. Brown. I want to make sure that if anyone is just joining us, they know what our topic is for tonight. We're talking about the benefits of pre-planning your funeral. If you have questions of Mr. Brown, who is a licensed funeral director, the number is 888-669-1280. Again, 888-669-1280. And if you're a shy person and don't want to talk, just post your comment and Tyrone will make sure that it is displayed. Again, we're talking about pre-planning your funeral. So Mr. Brown just shared that if you walk into his business, rather than investing in Harry Brown Funeral Home, you're investing in your future funeral and the funds that you will pay, the policy that you will get, if you will, if you do not have an insurance policy, will be placed in a trust or with an insurance company on your behalf. You will leave the business, take it to your loved one. Make sure, and that's the other thing that we need to make sure, that our loved one know where these documents are found. If you have insurance and or if you have purchased a pre-planned package, that your loved one know where those items are, so that in the event of your timely or untimely death, they'll know where to access those documents. I tell you what, Mr. Brown, one of the things that interesting things that happened with me, and again, I'm going to reference my dad's um, funerals because that is the closest loved one that has passed in my family that I actually had to handle, is knowing the difference, if you will, the itemization of all that goes along with the funeral. And we talked about that in terms of that liner that you mentioned. But I even was amazed the cost of putting the obituary in the newspaper. That was the biggest shocker to me. And then you talk about the programs. I've gone to numerous funerals where the paper program that I got, they ran out, right? So when people start thinking about the cost, they just think, oh, well, we just need someone to pick the body up, take it to the funeral home, preserve it or whatever that you all do with it, embalm it, prepare the body. I'll say prepare the body, embalm it, and then when then the family starts to plan the funeral, what the program may look like. People seem to pay more attention to the service related to their loved one going, and not in terms of any preparation, but all the steps that it takes to get to that point in terms of the picking up of the body, and someone even told me that if your loved one does not have a primary care physician, for example, like Dr. Kane, that they've been going to on a regular basis, somebody's going to have to sign off on that death certificate. And folks' loved ones are laying there at the morgue because no physician will sign off on it, because they were like, well, this guy, I haven't seen this guy. Dr. Kane may say, well, I haven't seen this guy in 5 years. But his loved one is saying, well, that's the last doctor that he went to, right? So it's also important to remember that I always tell people, be connected to a physician, be connected to your family, be connected to God, and be connected to did I say physician, God, your family,
Right.
and
Each other.
each other. Thank you. You know what I mean? Because again, you don't want your body to be laying at the morgue because you've not gone in to see a doctor on a regular basis. And people never think about that. Like, you've got to be connected to a physician in order for someone to sign off on. I think, guys, that was the biggest lesson that I've learned from other people. My dad had a doctor. Dr. Kane was his physician at the time. But I've heard countless stories of people who had never been to the doctor, or it had been 100 years since they'd gone to the doctor. What's your experience with that, Mr. Brown?
Wait a minute, before Mr. Brown say that, I gotta say this. I gotta say, if I'm the guy if I'm the guy dying, I'm dead. Do I really give a flying fart?
You don't.
You put this stress on your family.
I'm bad.
The answer to that question is yes, Doc, you do. Because
No.
you
No, I
put
can't.
untold,
I can't.
but no, in advance of your dying, you put an untold stress on family at a time
Exactly.
where they're already high.
I agree with you. I do. But that doesn't mean other people do. Other people.
Well, that's why we're educating them now, Dr. Kane, to tell
I agree
them.
with it. I just want to make sure people understand.
Dr. Kane has just been waiting to get flying fart in for 76 episodes.
I mean, do I really? Here's my point. That the person that is deceased, there is no feelings or anything else discussion coming from that person. It's the people that are left behind that have to deal with this issue. And that's one of the reasons we're having this broadcast, is because we're trying to help people who may be left behind. Not only, it is mainly the people that are left behind. It is not me, whom, if I don't do anything at all and just die tomorrow, my family is left with these issues. Period.
Burdens.
And there's no way I could give a flying fart about it because I'm not here. None of us know what happens next level. We read about what happened next level, but none of us know what happened next level. It's sure enough, I don't have a checkbook to be able to write out to Mr. Brown to take care of these funeral expenses, and I'm dead in a casket. Unless I pre-planned it and have it all paid for and done in a mannerism that my family don't have to worry about the stressors of dealing with this funeral. It's the only point I'm trying to make.
Well, here, I'd like to ask.
So I'd like for Mr. Brown to, if you will, I'd like for Mr. Brown to reply to that. Have you had an experience, I'm sure you have, where you've had a body and did not have anybody to sign off on it?
Yes and no. Let me explain that to you. This thing about the doctor signing off on your family's death certificate can go either way. There are several circumstances under which a dead person comes under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner. So those jurisdictional cases, even Dr. Kane don't have anything to do with those, even though he saw the patient for 20 years, know he had heart trouble and he died from heart failure. But what if his heart failure patient died in a house fire?
Mm.
You know, and maybe
Okay.
somebody was trying to cash in on his life insurance policy.
Mm.
Suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. So now Dr. Kane can't sign his death certificate because his death is gonna have to be determined by the medical examiner. And so that's what happens now
Okay.
when a person die and do not have a primary physician that's attending him on a regular basis, that's willing to sign the death certificate, then that person has to go to the medical examiner. And those bodies can sit there for a while until people kind of figure out what they want to do. In fact, you can't do anything until the medical examiner finish his thing. But the flip side of that is if it's a medical examiner's case, even if Dr. Kane wants to sign off on it, it belongs to the medical examiner and he can't sign off on it. And we do have a lot of young people that die. Most of those cases going to be medical examiner cases anyway. And a lot of times, here's this. I don't know if this been in Dr. Kane's experience. There are times when Dr. Kane have seen a patient for 10 years, treating them for various issues. And then the last time he saw the patient in his office, this patient was doing fine. But I don't feel comfortable because when he was in here a month ago, you know, he was doing very well. So I don't feel comfortable signing this death certificate. I think something else is going on. So Dr. Kane can refuse to sign the death certificate. And if he refuses to sign the death certificate, the medical examiner can send investigators out. They can decide if they want to take jurisdiction or if they want to push Dr. Kane's hand to sign the death certificate anyway. And they have that jurisdictional authority to do that. They can say, well, you know, you've been taking care of this man. Then he can explain to the investigators, I don't feel comfortable. I think it's something going left here. And if he says that to the medical investigator, they probably going to take jurisdiction. They're going to autopsy the body. And when they come back with their results, he may be right. Somebody is responsible for the death of this person and not his own natural causes.
And you know, I've run into cases just like what Mr. Brown has said, and that is where I really had either I had not seen the patients in a while, or I felt the patient was doing absolutely fine last time I saw him. He or she was found dead at home, and I'm going like, but why? And there are some state laws in place that try to force me to be able to sign off on these death certificates. And so there's a lot of times that I'm going, I'm not signing off on it because those are suspicious circumstances. Now that winds up being a fight between me and the medical examiner's office a lot of times. However, the point that I like to get to would be now you have people who have insurance on this individual, and those insurance companies are asking who is going to qualify this person's death as being natural causes or whatever it may be, so that the insurance policy may be paid out. So if you know insurance policy, some of them saying if there's accidental death, then they pay XYZ number of dollars. If there is a natural causes, they may pay less dollars than those that were accidental death. And they're not going to pay anything if somebody don't sign off on that death certificate. Meanwhile, Mr. Brown is sitting there waiting to get his money. Okay, and if you turn over the insurance policy to Mr. Brown, okay, now he's got the insurance policy in front of him. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get paid. And if the insurance policy is $100,000, Dr. Kane doesn't sign off on anything. Mr. Brown is holding. You can't get anything from that insurance policy until Mr. Brown releases it. If you're saying the insurance policy should pay for the funeral, correct me if I'm mistaken, Mr. Brown, but you have ownership of that insurance policy if those people signed it over to you to pay for that funeral, correct?
Right. Nobody is going to get paid. Not me, not the beneficiary, anybody. If the insurance company don't know what the person died from, they want to know that, and the reason why they want to know it, there's several reasons why. The main reason why they want to know, especially if it's out of the contestable period, is the beneficiary the cause of the insured's death.
Mm.
So if you the beneficiary of your father's death certificate and you got tired of taking care of him, you hasten his death, they want to make sure you're not going to get that money. They're going to send that money. They're going to make that check out to the estate of your father. In this particular example I'm talking about, and your father's estate going to have to be administered and probated, and then whoever gets your father's stuff, because you're going to be in prison once they figure out you did it. Whoever gets your father's estate going to get that life insurance money.
But how do you get paid, Mr. Brown, in case that there was no evil, in case there was no evil intent on anything, just as an example. But I'm just not, I hadn't seen the guy in a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't sign off on self-death certificates.
Right.
The person used his insurance policy as collateral to pay for his funeral.
Right.
That means before anybody can get any monies, it's got to clear it through you. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily. It's up to the beneficiary to assign the amount the funeral home owed to the funeral home. In a $100,000 situation with a $10,000 funeral, for example, somebody got $90,000 coming back to them. Only $10,000 is coming to the funeral home. So the beneficiary will assign $10,000 of that $100,000 policy to the funeral home, and the insurance company, once they get all the paperwork, the claim form, the death certificate signed by you, and anything else they require, when they get that, send it to the underwriting, and they look at it and say, well, this really looks good, we got to pay it. So I get $10,000 and the beneficiary get the $90,000 and a $100,000 situation. You know, that's how that works. But if somebody murdered, if the insured had something to do with the death, if the beneficiary had something to do with the insured's death, then the insurance company knows something about that. That's why they ask for news clippings. They ask for police reports doing these suspicious deaths. They want to make sure the wife didn't have something to do with the husband dying, the husband didn't have something to do with the wife dying, the parents didn't have something to do with the children dying. We live in a morbid society, and when people realize they can get money, they'll do anything to get it. Mothers will kill their children, fathers will kill their sons, mothers their daughters, husbands their wives, wives their husbands. We hear about it all day long on the news. And what was the motive? Money, greed. Money. And especially if you go out and get $1 million policy on somebody and they die in a short period of time, you better bet they're going to investigate that.
Well, but
tonight, Dr. Kane, I'm sorry, we're nearing the end of the show.
Okay.
And so, before we near the end of the show, I would like to really talk about tonight's subject was really the benefits of pre-planning. Yeah. So what are the benefits? Can you say, Mr. Brown, what are the benefits of pre-planning your funeral?
Well, if you pre-plan your own funeral, you got the first say so in what you want. And if you have some good family members that will follow your instructions to the T, you're going to get what you want in that pre-planned situation. The other benefit is you freeze the cost of a service now. If you pay for a funeral in 2010 and you die in 2023, you kind of beat inflation by 13 years in that example. So that's another benefit. Another benefit is it saves your family from going through the logistics of putting your funeral together, because you had the presence of mind to do it, and you set that in order, and all they have to do is go to the funeral home and just execute what you put together.
You avoid the rush of the funeral.
Yeah, you avoid the rush, and you can be grateful. You can be grateful to your expired family member for having the presence of mind to do all these things ahead of time to to keep you from having to go through. It's a lot. It's so much to have to go through when a person dies. And the closer you are to the person, the more you have to go through it, and the more you suffer through that thing. So if you can get somebody to pre-need a funeral, please do it. And my personal experience with family, most people come running to me when the doctor said they got 6 months to live. What I'm gonna do with that? You know, you have to be on a life insurance policy at least 2 years before they question anything about it. And then if you get a policy in less than 2 years, for the most part, you're just gonna get your money back plus 10%. And if it's a life insurance policy that's not connected with a pre-need or final expense type policy, you don't get anything back. You just, you know, we gamble on you, and you lost.
So you
So,
said
and then the
something
other
interesting.
benefit I see is that you complete your financial planning as to what you want to leave your relatives and after your death. There's a certain completion of financial planning that is afforded to you because you thought in advance to get this done and then leave your estate free of
Right.
this responsibility, at least in this case, in this responsibility, and you give them the benefit of moving forward and not spending a whole lot of your finances that you left for the family member. Not spending a whole lot of monies on that for to be able to dispense as you've already pre-planned your will, which is one of those things that we've done in the past, right, guys? That we
Yep.
estate planning. So you leave it to what you originally planned on your estate planning. You left all that money, if any, as far as insurance policy is concerned, left all that money for your loved ones and not to be buried in the ground with you.
Right. Right.
So, Mr. Brown,
Pre-plan.
let me ask you a different kind of question. You
Okay.
know, nowadays when youngsters are growing up and they think, you know, I want to be a doctor, a technology guy, a health educator, I want to be a teacher, whatever. Is there, how, should we also encourage our youngsters to consider becoming a licensed funeral director? Is it a
That's
good business to be a part of?
absolutely, and that's a profitable business too. Uh, if you're in a town that's not saturated, Jacksonville is quite saturated at this point, and we have a mortuary school here that's turning out about 25 or 30 mortuary potential funeral directors a year. You know, after the end of their rotation. So, but it's still a good profession to be in. And guess what? People going down, and they don't have to be buried. Yeah, they gonna have to be buried or cremated, and somebody gonna have to do it. Now, here's a good thing. If you are a very astute person, you really don't have to be a funeral director to do all this. You know, in recent years, we got together and we had the state to take off the death certificate, funeral director, person acting as such, because you really don't have to be a funeral director to do this. You have to know what to do though. Can you imagine going to Dr. Kane and he prescribe a plan of treatment for you, and then you think you know more than Dr. King about the plan of treatment that he prescribed for you, you know? So
See it all the time.
yeah, if you know how to treat yourself, there's a little quote in the Bible that says, "Physician heal thyself." If you know how to heal yourself, save your money, don't go to Dr. King.
Don't
If you
waste your
know,
time.
yeah, and if you know how to bury yourself, save your money, don't go to Harry Brown. You know, but that's not the way it is. Most people don't know how to handle these things, and they don't know the statutory requirements along the line. So you have to have a funeral service professional, and we're gonna always need them, and it's gonna always be enough business for everybody. If everybody stay in their own lane, it'll be enough business for all of us in perpetuity.
Mm.
Well, we're at the end of the show, Mr. Brown, and although we started the conversation by saying that I did, that this is a morbid subject, in all seriousness, it's a
Yes,
very important topic
it's
as
very
we talk about the benefits of pre-planning. I'm gonna flip the script a bit, and Mr. Brown, I'm gonna come back to you. But at the end of the show, we always like to give our guests and our behind-the-scenes guy an opportunity to share their final thoughts on
good.
tonight's topic. Tyrone, I'm going to start with you. What are your final thoughts on tonight's topic of the benefits of pre-planning your funeral?
Yeah, once again, it's always a pleasure to come from behind the scenes. Miss Jocelyn made mention earlier that you'll see I even changed my name. So I'm just called Tyrone now. But one of the things that I think is important for our viewers and our listeners to know is that insurance is one thing. Insurance is that we've heard several scenarios where you got $100,000 policy, so on and so forth. And that insurance money is designed to take care of the loss of a loved one financially. What we're talking about are the benefits of pre-need. There are a couple, I think Harry Brown did an awesome job in telling us, but there are a couple of others. There are added benefits such as the relief of stress and pressure to the loved ones left behind. At the moment when you lose someone dear to you, the amount of pressure and stress that goes into it is enough in itself, and then having to make countless decisions one after another. In the conversation today, you've heard us talk about the numerous things that have to be decided on, from the type of tomb and crypt they're going to be buried in, to the location, to all of the things. This is another advantage of pre-need. All right. And I like the fact that Mr. Brown took the time and took us to understand that today, if you to go the way of pre-need, your funds are protected. You're not doing pre-need with just Harry Brown. He has to make sure that money's in a trust or in an insurance policy that guarantees at the time of need, those funds are available, whether or not Harry Brown is there or not. Those are advantages to planning pre-need that I think are a serious plus to anyone in that situation.
Thank you, Tyrone, for your insight. Definitely some things to think about. Mr. Brown, what are your final thoughts for our listeners and viewers on the topic of the benefits of pre-planning your funeral?
I would like to leave this one very profound and unmistakable thing all families should do. Don't wait till Dr. Kane tell you you have 6 months to live to pre-plan your funeral, because there's nothing the funeral home going to be able to do for you in 6 months. There's no pre-planning for you. There's no other thing for you at that time except money out of your pocket. If you don't have $10,000 to put on a funeral when somebody dies, get you some insurance or get you a prepaid plan and be paying on it. And hopefully by the time the person expires with the pre-plan, with the pre-need plan, you will have enough in it so that it can cover all the expenses that you're going to. Please, please, please don't wait till the doctor say, I can't do no more, because there's nothing we can do except help you get through that. And it's going to be a big stressor for you to come up with thousands of dollars in a week when you had years to pre-plan.
Mm.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate those very profound thoughts of, again, something that we don't want to think about, but we know that is inevitable. We joke about it, that, there are things that one thing that we know for certain, that we're going to leave this earth, but we don't plan for that, that day. And it's definitely not something that we can ever do something about, other than obviously delaying it by leading a healthy life. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts on tonight's topic of pre-planning your funeral?
Well, I think Mr. Brown hit the nail on the head. The one thing that you want to make sure of, early in our conversation, just make sure that the person that you're dealing with, the funeral home director or the person who's planning your funeral, that you put your monies into, have that certificate of authority, the whole thing as it relates to licensure with the state, so that your monies are protected. One, for your loved ones to bury you with, or if you the loved ones that are paying for that funeral, to make sure that you do receive the monies that you put forth to be able to bury your mom, dad, sister, brother, whomever it may be. One thing for certain is death and taxes. Okay, and that's always been said. So make sure that you're gonna die, and I haven't seen anybody that's not taxed yet. So go on ahead and plan for both. Plan for your taxes, but most importantly, plan just as important, plan for your death when it comes down to your loved ones and their responsibility. Because it also helps with the financial planning for most of us, especially Black folks, that we're trying to leave something behind for our children. We see that in other races. They're always leaving things for their children so that they can have a financial benefit of growth to your existence. I want my kids to do better than me and to be better off than I ever was. Not saying that I owe them anything, but by the same token, they don't owe me anything, and that is having to suffer through my death and burial, and not me having not participated in planning it. The last thing I want to say is that you also need to discuss with your family members what's going on, because I have, as a physician, I have one daughter who bringing that patient all the time, take care of that mom, and she's the only one that I really know that has brought that person in. Then all of a sudden, upon their death, I'm getting requests from all other people, or upon their announcement of near dying, I'm getting conversation from all the other loved ones, and they want this and they want that, and I'm going like, well, who are you? So I would, it would have been very preferential if that parent or loved one could have discussed with their kids exactly what they want, plan exactly what they want, and if anybody decides that they want to do different than what she wants, that particular person is going to be the one responsible financially for any deviation from my plan on my funeral. Not put it off on their siblings, because trying to make them feel guilty, and then pay, excuse me, Mr. Brown, but then pay the funeral director $10,000 to put me in a hole. Because they feel better. Because, like he said, they neglected, or Tyrone said, one of you guys said, they neglected their mom or dad and feel guilty about it, and then wind up, now they want to, in their funeral, go all out, but they're not the ones paying for it necessarily. Okay, so they, if I can avoid that with my family members, my kids, if I can avoid that, that's exactly what I'm going to try to do. So, as Mr. Brown said, plan ahead. The best thing you can do is plan ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you again, Mr. Brown, for joining us tonight. And Call Tyrone, thank you for joining in the discussion. Pre-planning what's going to happen to us when we die is a topic that we don't always want to have. However, it is so beneficial for your family members to do to carry out your wishes, if you will. But the last thing I'd also like to say is, if your loved one made their wishes and were very succinct and clear about what they want, although they're no longer here to change that, don't walk in the funeral director's home, place of business, and dispute what your loved one has already put in writing. Respect the wishes of your loved one. Obviously, they knew what they wanted, which is why they made those plans in advance. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. And I always have to end by saying that if you have not gotten your COVID-19 vaccine and booster, please make sure that you do so that you won't end up at Mr. Brown's funeral place of business, and seriously, that you will not get severely sick or illness. I'd also like to add that if you've not gotten your shingles vaccine, make sure you get your shingles vaccine, because that's another illness that is very serious, and folks who get it get very sick from it. Thank you as always for tuning in to Pause for the
Turner,
Truth.
one thing we want to make sure. Sorry, it's voting time. I want to remind people to get out there and vote, whether it's for the mayor of whomever else, that's your city council. It's very important to get out and vote. I'm not going to tell you who Dr. Kane preference is, but we do want our listeners to get out there and vote and drive their families out to vote.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. Also make sure that before you cast your vote, that you talk to the individuals and make sure that they are in tune with whatever your concerns are for your family and your community. Roads, food deserts, the availability of medical care, all those things. Write a list of things that are important or lacking in your community or being threatened or challenged, and put those things to the faces of those individuals before you cast your vote. As always, thank you. Have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.